Hi, I'm going to attempt to make a relatively short video here, which will be a challenge for me, considering my last one was like 57 minutes. I want to do a 1-2 follow-up to previous videos. The first video I want to do a quick follow-up to is Jimmy Dore cravenly defends Alex Jones, and the other one I want to do a quick correction in addition to is New Zealand rejects white supremacy. Now, on my Jimmy Dore video, I received a lot of negative pushback for this, ton of downvotes, lots of people saying like, haha, nice ratio, bro. Obviously people hate what you have to say, you regressive scum, etc. Partly because a well-known anti-feminist sent his fans at me to downvote my video and leave negative comments. And also partly because some people just genuinely disagreed with my position and thought that Jimmy Dore was in the right about what he had to say. Not long after that video, I was banned from Twitter. The video was about how Alex Jones had been kicked off Facebook and various other platforms, YouTube, and I said, I understand that and I get why he was kicked off those places, and I don't think it's such a bad thing because it makes sense if you look at what Alex Jones does, and I walked through what Alex Jones said people had done, such as running child rape rings, or that the victim massacres at Sandy Hook were actors defaming a yogurt company as purposefully hiring rapists, etc. And that due to this, I defended Facebook and YouTube's right to not host that kind of shit on their platform. Not long after that, I was banned from Twitter, and then there was heaps of people in my comments crying like, aha, this is the world you wanted, you had it coming. Now, I just gotta point out, my position on this was that the terms of service of these places should be policed in a consistent and rational and reasonable way by humans who actually give a crap about whether something is a joke or something is a serious threat. And considering that there's a 97% chance that the first time I was banned off Twitter, I was simply false flagged by a troll who wanted to say that I'd done something wrong, and then the robots at Twitter who don't care about context suspended my account without telling me at all what had been done. Now that is not what I'm for. What I would be for would be if they could communicate with you and that you had the chance to explain yourself and that you actually received some feedback. They could show you where you broke the terms of service and how, and you could have an interaction about your account and about what your future actions may be if you believe that you have made a mistake. How it currently is that a algorithm or a robot flags you down, they put a lock or a suspension on your account, you try to appeal, they ignore you, they just send a generic chunk of the terms of service, you have no idea what you did wrong, you were probably just targeted by someone who wanted to shut you up because they didn't like what you have to say, and then you get suspended and you're banned. That is not what I am for. I think that these platforms are run like total shit. Particularly Twitter is a troll's paradise. They do not care at all about whether people have legitimately broken the terms of service. It's a robotic, faceless, bureaucratic process, which is actually less political than people think it is, because it's not really about politics. It's just about mindless trolls manipulating an algorithmic process that is completely impersonal. And the way to solve that would be if they could hire more people who actually gave a single fuck about what people were talking about or saying on their platforms, but they're not going to do that because they want to save money and make as much money as possible because they are faceless corporations. So that is my position, and that did not apply to Alex Jones because I could see what Alex Jones had done, the way that he had slandered, libeled, and tried to destroy specific individuals' lives, and how he had completely decimated the terms of service in every possible way, and that if they actually got real people's eyes on that to look at it properly, they would conclude this guy is a maniac who should not be on our platform, and that's completely different than somebody saying something that seems offensive or even very offensive. And I'm actually quite liberal on these topics. I do think like a blanket kind of kill this group of people kind of thing, that's going beyond the pale. But if people just want to say ignorant and stupid things, that is the kind of thing that you just need to address in the marketplace of ideas. And Alex Jones, to me, did not conform to that. It doesn't mean that I think Twitter and YouTube are run well, because they are not. I have some friends on YouTube who are continually flagged off YouTube for completely unfair reasons because the people running YouTube have their heads up their asses. Now, the main reason I bring up this topic again is because there was a conversation, or an argument, I would say, between Jimmy Dore and Steve O on the Aggressive Progressives show. Steve O is one of the co-creators and founders of the Young Turks and one of the managers or main owners of the company, and he regularly comes on Aggressive Progressives as a panelist. First, it was great to see Jimmy Dore receive a lot of pushback, and second, it just shows that the people on the different sides of this are not listening to each other at all. I actually had disagreements with both of their positions, which I'll explain soon, but Jimmy Dore spent 10 minutes ranting about how corporate overlords will decide decide who gets to see what, and how Google and YouTube and Twitter and so forth have been working with governments to suppress certain speech, and read an article by Matt Taibbi talking about this new era of censorship and control at these social media companies, which are like monopolies. I agree with all of that. I think that's all true. But then he keeps sprinkling throughout the entire thing, and they shut down Alex Jones. If you didn't defend Alex Jones, then you hate free speech. He also said freedom of speech and free speech are different concepts.
When we were defending free speech here at the Aggressive Progressives, when we were the idea of free speech, which is different than freedom of speech. So freedom of speech is ensconced in our Constitution, but free speech is an idea that comes from the Enlightenment period, which is against censorship no matter where it comes from, whether it comes from the government or a religion or a corporation. So, and it was also based on the idea that these platforms like Facebook and YouTube are monopolies, and that they should be treated as the public square. And so we should use our First Amendment and apply it to those platforms.
What people in the Enlightenment, I tried to look up about this, they talked about freedom of expression, and they talked about free speech. The Constitution of America was inspired by Enlightenment philosophers, but I couldn't find any differentiation between free speech and freedom of speech between Enlightenment philosophers and the Constitution when I was trying to research this. I know Locke and Voltaire talked about freedom of expression, but I didn't see anything that could be applicable to private companies and Twitter and so forth. I did find one quote by John Stuart Mill, who is post-Enlightenment, who said something that I think could be applied to this. Society can and does execute its own mandates, and if it issues wrong mandates instead of right, or any mandates at all in things with which it ought not to meddle, it practices a social tyranny more formidable than many kinds of political oppression, since, though not usually upheld by such extreme penalties, it leaves fewer means of escape, penetrating much more deeply into the details of life and enslaving the soul itself. I think you could apply that quote to Twitter and Facebook. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter have become so ubiquitous as forms of expression that to be banned off them is basically being excluded from the social norm, from the biggest possible platforms where you could have a voice. So I don't know what Jimmy Dore was talking about. However, thinkers like John Stuart Mills have said things that could apply here, I think. You could see Facebook as a form of social tyranny. But what happened in this conversation was eventually Steve O got irritated that Jimmy Dore kept mentioning Alex Jones in the same breath as collusion with governments and corporate censorship, when Steve O was aware that obviously Alex Jones did a lot of fucked up stuff which could be perceived to go against the terms of service.
We live in a neoliberal nightmare, and our whole goddamn country is being run by corporatists in bed with the government. Let me go to you, Steve. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I mean, look, I agree with everything you guys are saying, but I don't know why we have to keep going back to Alex Jones as a reason why he should not be censored. Because I don't want government spying. I don't want government plus corporations spying and censoring political speech. That doesn't mean that a platform can't ever kick anyone off for any reason. But
there has to be a process in place that is transparent. That is not what's happening. Right now it's happening in secret with warmongering motherfuckers like Henry Kissinger telling
I agree with you on all of that part, okay? I mean,
so yes, you can take someone down. You have to have an adversarial judicial process.
So the bit where it all turns to shit is when Jimmy Dore says we need an adversarial judicial process. And Steve O says, I don't know what that means. Will they have the right to then take those places to court and have an adversarial judicial process? I mean, it sounds good, but the logistics of that sound totally insane. And it would probably decimate those companies eventually just from lawsuits. And I guess that's what some people might want. It would probably spell the death of YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And I don't know, maybe that's what some people want. It's a very love-hate relationship with these platforms. I'm very, very glad that I can be on YouTube and share my opinion about it, but I'm also very wary of the systems of YouTube and how it can be taken away at a moment's notice by disingenuous trolls. But does that mean I would prefer that YouTube was decimated by lawsuits because every single nobody in the world could bring a lawsuit about being banned from it? I don't know about that. I think it would make a lot more sense to have a much better appeals process where you can explain to a human being what what went on and what happened, and then they could actually look at your case, look at the context, and actually use their fucking brain to figure out whether you did something wrong. But in that system, they still might find that Alex Jones deserved to be kicked off the platform, and a lot of people will be unhappy about that. Tiny little channels may get banned or flagged for things. No one's ever going to care about them because it's only the big people like Alex Jones who ever get any fucking attention for anything. What about people who are not psychotic sociopathic monsters like Alex Jones? Why is he the one that you have to care about so fucking much? It's because he's got so many subscribers and he's so big, but that just means that he's done more damage with his psychotic lies. I don't think that he is the person that you really should be focused on.
I don't know what that means.
So,
like a courtroom?
Yes, that's what I mean.
No.
Just like Matt Taibbi said, there's been for years, we've had a standard in this country. If someone is using their speech poorly, you go to court. But you're advocating for billionaire guys in Silicon Valley to decide this all on their own, and you run a fucking media company?
Yes, I am.
And that's what you're advocating for?
Yes, I am.
Really?
Yes, I'm advocating that platforms can take down certain creators.
I can't wait till DYT is taken down for being against a war.
The problem
All they have to do is say you're sowing discord.
The problem
What are you
is,
saying? You're saying that you want Mark Zuckerberg, or whatever the fuck Zuckerberg's
Why don't
name
you let me
is.
finish then?
Okay, I'll let you.
Okay? Instead of keep constantly interrupting, why don't you let me finish for a
Okay,
second,
I'll let you.
Right? My point is, if you are taking anyone down for their political speech, that is totally wrong. And I'm against all of that. What I'm saying is that there are people who violate terms of service and do other things that's not protected speech, and they can be taken down. And here's what I mean by that. For example, if you start showing porn, that's not allowed. You can be taken down for that. If you're harassing individuals and making their lives miserable, they can take you down for that.
Who's they? Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
Who's they?
YouTube or Facebook or
some
Spotify
nameless,
or,
unaccountable person.
Yes, they can.
Okay, that is a intellectually lazy position.
No, it's
that
not.
I've debunked a million times
Why?
here already.
That is the case now. A faceless person at Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube can take down your shit. That's just how it fucking is. So this conversation goes on to about the process. What should the process be for taking down people from these places? And I think Jimmy Dore agrees, Steve-O agrees, and I agree the process needs to be a lot different because the process sucks donkey dick. But to Jimmy, the fix is having endless court cases because being on YouTube is explicitly a free speech issue in his mind because of the Enlightenment or something. At least to me, it should be about being able to appeal to a human being who actually looks at your case and actually cares about the context of what you've said and what you're trying to do. Which means that trolls couldn't be able to control the platform because people who actually care are looking at the cases. And that's just not how it is. It's not that way. It's not contradictory to say that taking down Alex Jones kind of made sense, but at the same time, these websites are fucked.
So a platform cannot take down anyone for any reason without a hearing in a court of law?
You can throw someone in jail without a hearing. You mean you have to have a hearing every time you throw someone in jail? Every time you take someone's freedom of speech away?
I never said jail. Did I say jail?
Did
I say jail?
Okay, so
that's the false equivalency. Okay, that's total fucking bullshit, and you know it. Okay.
So you're saying free speech?
I'm not talking about free speech. I'm talking about the right to be on a platform. That is not free speech.
So you don't think that?
That is not.
So you disagree with the idea of free speech?
No, I'm not. See, that's a straw man. Bullshit argument. That's a bullshit argument.
Let's talk
so
about
it. So why don't you let me finish then?
Okay, I'll let you finish.
You keep interrupting me without letting me finish.
I actually disagree a little bit with Steve-O when he says it's not about freedom of speech and it's not about free speech. You know, being on Twitter and being on Facebook and being on YouTube is not about free speech. I think that statement is too absolute. I think it's not necessarily about free speech, but it could be and it can be in certain contexts. If I said something critical of the government on Twitter, YouTube, etc., and I got banned for that, but it's very hard to think of a time when somebody was explicitly banned for saying something political. Maybe people who say political things are banned, but it was never explicitly you are banned because you said Donald Trump is a war criminal or something like that. That would be absolutely outrageous for someone to be banned for. Someone who said that may be banned for a different reason, like you did targeted harassment or something rather vague that is not explained. And I talked to someone who is somewhat of an expert on this issue, and they said that legally the lines between public free expression and free speech are constantly being blurred on these these platforms when you have, for example, on Twitter, Donald Trump giving official government positions, when you have court cases deciding Donald Trump can't block people because he's providing a public service by announcing his administration's positions. Then the space between public and private gets very murky, and when you have Facebook and YouTube, etc., working with governments to promote certain positions and quash certain posts about certain things, then it definitely becomes a free speech issue. If I lived in a country where I was told that I was not allowed to criticize something about my government, and the government was working with Facebook to promote certain views and quash other ones, that's a free speech issue. So I think Steve-O's view on that is simplistic, but so is Jimmy Dore's. His position is it's always free speech. But that's not true. For example, when I was banned off Twitter, that wasn't a free speech issue because there's very little chance it was anything to do with some critical position of somebody in power. The very likely explanation is that a troll targeted me, so they found a problematic tweet and got me taken down. That wasn't a freedom of speech issue. That was a Twitter sucks shit issue. And it's a very terrible platform to express your free opinions on because it's so fucking badly run. And this conversation about turning Facebook and YouTube and Twitter into public utilities is another thing which I just cannot wrap my head around, and I'm not an expert on that, obviously, and I don't know what the fuck the right thing is. I can't say. People like Jimmy Dore are like, they should turn it into public utilities. Even Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk, they should make it into a public utility. But when you think about public utilities in most countries, or just places that are government funded, like NPR, PBS, in New Zealand we've got Radio New Zealand, TVNZ, Telesur was another one in South America, RT, Russia Today, is funded by Moscow and the Russian government. Those sources are not that critical of those governments, are they? They often serve more as mouthpieces, and they don't allow that much radical speech on their platforms, certainly not ones that go against their funders, which are those governments. And that could cause its own sort of clusterfuck of Facebook and YouTube and Twitter explicitly working with the American government. So when I see people like Jimmy Dore saying, I hate the powerful, I hate the corporations, I hate the censorship and the control, is it not strange to then turn around and say, so they should be public utilities, which are explicitly regulated and controlled in a much closer manner by the government? Unless public utilities is different than I think, because yes, I admit I'm ignorant on this subject. I feel like I'd have to research it a bunch. Please tell me down below about the public utility argument, because it's one that people just throw out there, but I don't know the dimensions of that, and I don't know how they know that would be a good thing. That could well be disastrous in its own way. It's very hard to know what's better, privately run YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, or publicly run and owned Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook, or would the best thing be something in the middle, like part public, part private, regulated by the public, but sort of private, and they receive some government investment? Maybe that would be better. I don't know, tell me. And another quick point was just that Jimmy Dore keeps talking about Noam Chomsky. Chomsky wrote in an email on the topic of Alex Jones, I did appear on Jones's show, not knowing who he was. When it became apparent, I considered just walking out because it's all so ridiculous, but out of politeness, stayed on. What I've seen of what he does is outrageous. But unlike many civil libertarians here, and especially in other countries, I don't think that the right way to deal with hate speech and crazed fabrications is to ban them, rather to confront them and to seek and confront the reasons why anyone pays a moment's attention to them. The real story about marginalization of opinion and information is, as always, radically different and undiscussed. Do you disagree with Chomsky? Disagree with Noam Chomsky? Noam Chomsky said this. Noam Chomsky defended Alex Jones. Do you disagree with Noam Chomsky? You agree with war criminals like Henry Kissinger, whose Atlantic Council, which is headed by John Huntsman, former Republican president candidate, is working with Facebook to police their own terms of service. You side with Henry Kissinger, war criminal, over Noam Chomsky, and I will just say the Atlantic Council thing is incredibly problematic. The fact that they are working with these war criminals and Republicans is very suspicious and fucked up, and something I'm totally against. So don't strawman me on that, although I will say it's very unclear exactly how much control and influence the Atlantic Council has. I have no idea what they're actually doing. It could be something big, or it could be nothing burgers. It's hard to tell. But just the association itself is fucked up. But I think that's an appeal to authority. Why can't you disagree with Chomsky? Chomsky is obviously a much smarter, better informed individual than I am. He's an extreme expert on so many topics, an incredible linguist and moral philosopher, but that doesn't mean that he can't say one small snippet of something that I think is wrong. I think when you say the thing about hate speech is that we should refute it in the public sphere, that's a privileged position to take, because you are not taking that as the person who has been the target of that particular hate speech. As a moral philosopher and somebody who opines on these kinds of things, I think we should just debate hate speech. That's fine. But to the guy who's accused of running a child rape ring in his restaurant, he doesn't have that luxury. That's just a privileged position, and I think it lacks perspective. The question about hate speech is not to do with what we as outside observers think of that. It's to do with what the people involved involved in that situation have to deal with and the effect on those people's lives, because you have a right to not have your life be destroyed by somebody lying about you incessantly and over. And in that quote, it appears Noam Chomsky is downplaying that right, the right to not be libeled and slandered with false accusations. So I would just disagree with Chomsky on that. I don't think that's a very well thought out view of it. And you can think that while at the exact same time thinking that corporate power and overreach and monopoly is a massive problem. And they talked about how Telesaur English got shut down, but Facebook said it was just an error and a mistake. And I'm not sure what to believe on that. I certainly can't see what Telesaur could have possibly done to warrant being taken down in a targeted way. Could be while they're just lurking through all of these websites trying to find things, an idiot at Facebook overreaches and takes down a page without considering at all the implications of that, or being able to explain why that happened, or could have been a bot or an algorithm. Again, they need more humans working at these places. So that's that. I'm glad that Jimmy Dore received some pushback. I wish he wouldn't yell at me so much. And I think the two sides of this divide are not listening to each other. That much is obvious. Last part, this is just addressing an error that I made in my previous video, New Zealand Rejects White Supremacy, regarding Aboriginal or Aborigine or Native Australians or Indigenous Australians or etc, etc. There's many different phrases, and I'm going to actually talk a little bit about what phrases are seen as acceptable to refer to the Indigenous people of Australia.
Wrong.
I want to make this comment just based on a YouTube comment that I received. This person wrote, "Very disappointed to see you dwell on the racist hypotheticals of Baldy and Barbie with your own racist hypotheticals about the lives of Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people don't have witch doctors. They have medicine people who prescribe things like lemon myrtle, which has a metric fuckton of science showing that it has loads of healing properties for minor ailments like colds and stuff. Assuming they are noble savages like how Baldy and Barbie make out, but with the appendix of not all, is no better. Next time, just try to do some research about their pseudoscientific claims. It's not like they ever hold any academic scrutiny anyways." Now, when I make a video, particularly a very long video, and it has a very narrow focus, which for that video was just exploring what happened on their visit, some history and context about these individuals, and then my opinion on free speech issues, etc., I invariably make errors and mistakes, because I touch on subjects of which I am no expert and which I need to learn more. Then I want to get my video out because it takes so fucking long to make a video that I just go ahead and do it, and then those bits slip through, and then commenters notice that bit's wrong, or you bought the racist framing of somebody like Stefan Molyneux. And comments like this are actually very useful for me. When a commenter says that you completely fucked up something, and then they can explain how you fucked it up, that's a great comment. I receive a lot of comments, and many of the comments are just like, "You regressive scum, how are Lauren and Stefan racist, you fucking, can't you see a different point of view? You liar, you're disingenuous, you suck, your videos are garbage. Why do you have so many jump cuts and edits in your videos? It's pathetic, your face is ugly, your voice is whiny." Those kinds of comments, who cares? They're a dime a dozen. You just get them all the time from people who don't think or have brains, and I very rarely delete them because who gives a shit? You got 10,000 downvotes. I don't care about that either, because downvotes to me are a representation of where the audience is at politically and ideologically, particularly when you've come to conflict with a larger YouTuber. The more downvotes you get, the more it shows that a particular hive brain of commenter who all sort of believe the same things and have an ideological problem with your position are looking at your video and downvoting it and leaving comments like, "You're a hypocritical, regressive cuck." It's not a representation of the rightness or wrongness of your position. It's literally a representation of how much of a hive mind the audience is at the moment. Unless your video was transparently extremely terrible, like Friday by Rebecca Black or something like that, that's obviously not the case. But this comment made me want to learn more about Aboriginal people, because in the video I did not really refute Stefan's assertion that they have witch doctors. So I did a little bit of research on this. First, what do native, indigenous, Aboriginal people in Australia like to be referred to as? Because I just said native or Aboriginal freely without thinking about it. From Amnesty International it says, "Is it okay to call Indigenous Australians Aborigines? Aborigine is generally perceived as insensitive because it has racist connotations from Australia's colonial past and lumps people with diverse backgrounds into a single group. You're more likely to make friends by saying Aboriginal person, Aboriginal, or Torres Strait Islander. If you can, try using the person's clan or tribe name. And if you're talking about both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, it's best to say either Indigenous Australians or Indigenous people. Without a capital A, Aboriginal can refer to an Indigenous person from anywhere in the world. The word means original inhabitant in Latin." So apparently Aborigine is the wrong one, Aboriginal person or Aboriginal is okay. I'd have to go back and check what I said. Trying to get by, and the more that the Aborigines are kind of immiserated by the colonial history. And the fact is, Aborigines, they need help just like every other human. This article here says, what may have seemed acceptable terminology in the past could be considered extremely offensive today. Terms such as half-caste, full-blood, natives. I did say native Maori person in my video. Fuck if it isn't delicious. A native person who was from this country, who has been here before anybody else, is telling her to fuck off. You know, an ethno-nationalist. Delicious.
Boo, you suck!
Blacks, darkies, blackfellas, and other more offensive terms were often communicated in a disparaging and racist manner. For many Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people, offensive terms can cause reactions such as distress, anger, and resentment. So I'm getting from this you should say Aboriginal, Aboriginal person, Torres Strait Islander, potentially indigenous Aboriginal, because it says here, be aware that some, if not many, Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander peoples are dissatisfied with the term indigenous. Reasons may include it can detract from the preferred identity of the individual or group of people. Although the term is used for inclusiveness, Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders are dissimilar in many ways, such as their identity, culture, traditions, language, beliefs, ethnicity, issues, protocols, continuity of existence and history before and after the settlement, blah, blah, blah. So indigenous might not always apply. Obviously I didn't know all the stuff before I made this video, because that was a part I just skipped past. Another point is on witch doctors, which itself is a colonial term. I found an interesting book by a woman who lived amongst Aboriginal tribes and people for many years and went through a kind of spiritual transformation, and she briefly talks about the phrase witch doctor. She wrote, Aborigines, ooh, you're not meant to say that, had their own words for healers and magic work, since they knew the word witchcraft from missionaries who translated it into their language as meaning a worker of harmful and evil magic. Those who held fast to the old ways might well deny their spiritual work was anything to do with this missionary-defined word witchcraft. This is also true among other missionized indigenous people. Many of today's Sami and northern Scandinavia hold the work of their shamans to be sacred and will thus deny it has anything to do with witchcraft. The influence of Bible translating societies on tribal societies has been documented and deplored by such human rights organizations as Survival International in its book Is God an American? So when these places were colonized, the settlers said, look at this witchcraft, because their view on the world was that there are witches and witch doctors when there is magic, and that magic is an evil, scary, negative thing associated with paganism and perhaps Satanism, and they simply just put that label onto the people who live there. So just saying witch doctors itself is problematic, because that's not really what they are. They're not witch doctors. That's a colonial term. I bought that framing in my video, which is my fault. I take responsibility for that. They're 3.3% of the population. There is no risk of the Aboriginal people overtaking Australia, putting witch doctors in hospitals. The Aboriginals that do believe in witch doctors and have witch doctors are simply not going to get them put into hospitals, except maybe in the most rural, out-of-touch place that could possibly exist.
You're an idiot.
As I was researching this, I found a phrase, Ngangkari. I don't know if I'm saying that right. For example, Ngangkari, or indigenous healers, are regularly reported to have travelled to the Darwin, Alice Springs, Adelaide, Kalgoorlie, and Broome hospitals to carry out their work at the request of patients and their family members. So one particular word is Ngangkari, and there are different types of people. There are healers, there are people known as clever men, who are just people who have a lot of knowledge and could work in various fields, and there were also people who used this so-called magic as a weapon or as warriors. Magical practices, based on my research, are mostly psychological, in that these rituals that they will perform in hospitals are not intended to, for example, cure your cancer, or as an alternative to modern medicine. It's basically just a spiritual boost that makes you feel in touch with the land and with your ancestors. It's just a custom or a tradition which is not harmful. This article talks about how the families would just request that spiritual healers would come into the hospitals and they would just do these spiritual ceremonies, and then they would continue on to have westernized medicine apply to them. Whereas the way Lawrence Southern and Stefan Molyneux say it is, this will be an alternative to Western medicine. Are we going to ban like praying in a hospital? If you want to bring in your pastor and have a praying session in your hospital room, what the hell is wrong with that? If you want to have the spiritual healer come in and heal your spirit, to just make you feel more in touch with your ancestors, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Where's the problem? But I understand that you shouldn't legitimize the racist framing of people like Stefan and Lauren. And I was guilty of that, but that's because I'm just a bit ignorant on the subject, to be honest, and my knowledge of tikanga and te reo and Māori culture itself is very limited, and I'm working on that too. What can I say? I'm just a white European dude commenting on things that I don't fully know about. So I would adjust that to, if they did get witch doctors put into hospitals, the vast majority of the time, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with that, because it would not be an alternative to Western medicine. It would be a therapeutic addition to whatever other treatment they were receiving. It would apply more to mental health. And I think so long as they are not making prescriptions to prevent anything else from happening, like surgery, for example, the mental health aspect of it sounds incredibly useful and is very good for people. So I'd totally advocate for that to be in hospitals. I think that would be a very good idea. I can see absolutely no evidence that a Ngākari has ever prevented anybody from receiving actual, like, scientific Western medicine. Also, one sentence I said in that video was that there's a lot of Aboriginal people who are alcoholic and they are considered dirty, etc. They're pretty much just completely fucked on every possible level. So many of them are struggling and homeless and alcoholic. Their families have been torn apart. They have no resources. They have no jobs. Their culture has been so utterly raped by the Europeans, to be frank, that they have a reputation as being, you know, savage criminals and dirty and so forth, because they have no prospects, they have no hope, they have nothing to turn to. They just end up on the streets or, yeah, like doing crime, you know, trying to get by. And I was trying to say that if that is the view of Aboriginal people, the reason for that is because they have been completely crushed and destroyed by colonialism. And the more that colonialism destroys them, the more that the European mainstream tries to say things like that they are alcoholic and dirty and all this kind of stuff, but that if they are suffering from any of those things, it is like literally nothing to do with them as Aboriginal people. It's 100% to do with the colonialism destroying them as people. It's just crushed their culture. That is the point of that. But I do understand that the way that I delivered that line may have made it appear that that is what I think about Aboriginal people, so I think I should have put more context around that. Anyways, I think it was important to address that issue. Unlike a lot of YouTubers, when I receive feedback that I think is actually important or useful, I want to address that and I want to do better at these kinds of things. It was a very good opportunity for me to learn more about Aboriginal people and a good opportunity for me to work on my cultural knowledge of people who are not like myself. I also said, perhaps in a semi-edgy way, that Aboriginal people have a lot of superstitions that I think are bunk, and I'm sorry to edgelord out, I still stand by that. But I don't mean that in a very judgmental way. I just mean that personally, I am hyper-atheistic on these things, and I think that we are just hunks of flesh with no soul, and we're all gonna die and rot. And that's just my view on that. European traditions of Christianity are superstition. Animistic traditions of Aboriginal people are superstitions. Shinto of Japan, another animistic religion, that is a superstition. Buddhism is a superstition. That all of it is superstition. But I don't say that in a like, ha, look at these backwards people kind of way. My personal feeling is that it's all superstition and that there's no point to life. We're all gonna die and rot. So that's just my happy conclusion. The cat is fucking with the camera stand. Thank you very much.